You humans do what now? Ambassador Zixtal's crystalline appendages trembled in what their species considered laughter.
You deliberately enter hazardous situations. To rescue others? Fire Chief Marcus Rivera leaned back in his chair, boots propped on his desk, a knowing smile playing across his weathered features.
That's exactly what we do, Ambassador. Though I have to admit, when you put it that way, it does sound a bit crazy. The crystalline being's translucent form flickered with pulses of confused amber light. But surely you have automated systems, drones, AI-controlled rescue units? Oh, we have those too, Marcus replied, taking a casual sip from his coffee mug emblazoned with "I fight what you fear" in faded letters. But sometimes you need the human touch. Sometimes you need someone crazy enough to run towards the danger when everyone else is running away. The conversation might have continued in this vein of friendly cultural exchange, if not for the sudden, sharp wail of the station alarm. Marcus's boots hit the floor before the first tone finished echoing through the building. "Well, Ambassador," he said, already moving with practiced efficiency toward his turnout gear. "Looks like you're about to get a front-row seat to human emergency services in action. That's if you're interested in tagging along." The alien diplomat's crystalline form vibrated with what might have been excitement or terror. It was hard to tell with their species.
Yes. For scientific observation, of course. Of course, Marcus grinned, hitting the apparatus bay at a run.
Just try not to shatter when things get hot. The scene that greeted them as Engine 51 rounded the corner was straight out of a nightmare. Or at least, it would have been for most species.
The Galactic Federation's newly constructed embassy complex, a towering marvel of alien architecture, had somehow caught fire. Quantum glass windows reflected the dancing flames within, while anti-gravity lifts sparked and sputtered. Their exotic technology clearly not designed with terrestrial firefighting in mind. "By the cosmic core," Ambassador Zixtal whispered from their safety-reinforced observation position.
"There are still beings inside." Marcus was already coordinating with his team, years of training evident in every swift, precise movement.
"Thompson, take the east stairwell. Rodriguez and Patel, get those alien sprinkler systems working with our equipment. Jackson, you're with me." "But the building's internal temperature is approaching 800 degrees Celsius, the ambassador protested. The structural integrity of the quantum glass could fail at any moment. No rational being would... They didn't get to finish their sentence because Marcus and his team were already charging into the building, their thermal imaging equipment and breathing apparatus making them look more alien than the actual aliens they were rushing to save. What followed was 20 minutes of what the ambassador would later describe in their official report as controlled chaos orchestrated by certified lunatics. Human firefighters moved through the burning building with an efficiency that bordered on supernatural, their knowledge of fire behavior, and building construction allowing them to navigate spaces that should have been impossible to traverse. Marcus found himself face to face with a terrified Medusan diplomat, their serpentine appendages tangled in debris. Without hesitation, he scooped up the alien official, who was technically classified as a Class 3 toxic substance, and began their evacuation. "Don't worry," he shouted over the roar of the flames, his voice muffled by his mask. "We train for this kind of thing." "You train to rescue toxic telepathic serpents from quantum glass buildings?" the Medusan managed to ask between panic-induced psychic pulses. "Well, not specifically," Marcus admitted, ducking under a falling beam. "But the principle's the same. Head down, move fast, don't die." Outside, Ambassador Zixtal watched in amazement as human after human emerged from the inferno, each carrying or guiding various alien diplomats to safety. Their crystalline form had taken on a deep blue hue of respect, and perhaps a touch of embarrassment over their earlier amusement. The operation continued with the kind of organized precision that only looks like chaos to the untrained eye. Human firefighters worked seamlessly with their equipment, adapting standard procedures on the fly to deal with the unique challenges posed by alien architecture and biology. Rodriguez had somehow managed to interface their water supply with the building's quantum cooling system, creating an improvised fire suppression method that would later be studied and implemented across the galaxy. Thompson and Jackson had evacuated a group of gaseous beings using modified air tanks, while Patel had figured out how to stabilize a collapsing anti-gravity shaft using nothing but standard rescue struts and what she later described as aggressive engineering. As the last of the fires was brought under control, Marcus found himself standing next to the still stunned Ambassador Zixtal. "I believe," the crystalline being said slowly, "that I owe you and your entire species an apology." "Oh?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, working to remove his sooty gear. "Yes.
We of the Galactic Federation have long considered humans to be, how shall I put this diplomatically, somewhat primitive in your technological development. Marcus chuckled, running a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. Let me guess, because we still do things manually instead of automating everything? Precisely. But today I have learned something profound about your species. The ambassador's form shifted to a deep purple of revelation. You are not primitive at all. You have simply chosen a different path of evolution, one that embraces your biological capabilities rather than seeking to replace them. That's a pretty fancy way of saying we're crazy enough to run into burning buildings. Marcus grinned. No, it is more than that, Zixtal insisted. Your emergency services, your firefighters, your paramedics, your search and rescue teams, they are not just professions. They are a manifestation of something unique about humanity. Our poor survival instincts? Your exceptional capacity for controlled risk-taking in service of others, the ambassador corrected. Most species either avoid danger entirely or rush in without thought. Humans have found a way to dance with danger, to study it, to train for it, to make saving lives in hazardous conditions into a science and an art form. Marcus considered this as he watched his team beginning their post-incident procedures, checking equipment and swapping stories about the challenges they'd faced inside. You know, I never thought about it that way. For us, it's just the job. And that, Zixtal said, is perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. The story of the embassy fire spread quickly through the Galactic Federation. Within weeks, there were diplomatic requests for human emergency service advisors on dozens of worlds. The Federation's Security Council convened a special session to study human crisis response methodologies. And in fire stations across Earth, firefighters dealt with their newfound galactic fame the same way they dealt with everything else. With dedication, professionalism, and more than a few jokes about having to rescue literal aliens now. 6 months later, Marcus found himself teaching a class of alien first responders. Their varied forms all focused intently on his lesson about risk assessment and rescue protocols. The key thing to remember, he told them, is that being brave doesn't mean being fearless. It means being scared but doing what needs to be done anyway. That's something humanity learned a long time ago, and it's something we've built our entire emergency response system around. A tentacled being raised an appendage. But how do you overcome the biological imperative to flee from danger? Marcus smiled, thinking of all the calls he'd responded to over the years. All the lives saved because someone was willing to run towards the danger. We don't overcome it. We work with it. We train until the procedures become second nature. We learn to understand fire behavior, building construction, medical conditions, whatever we're dealing with. Knowledge helps control fear. And then we remember why we're doing it. Because it is your duty? A crystalline being similar to Ambassador Zixtal asked. Because every life has value, Marcus corrected. Because someone needs help, and we can provide it. Everything else, the training, the equipment, the protocols, that's just how we make sure we can help effectively and safely. The class nodded, or made their species equivalent gestures, taking notes and asking questions. Marcus could see in their varied expressions the same revelation he'd witnessed in Ambassador Zixtal months ago. The understanding that sometimes the most advanced solution isn't about having better technology, but about having the right combination of knowledge, training, and raw human courage. Later that evening, as Marcus filed his teaching report, he couldn't help but smile at how things had turned out. The Galactic Federation had come to Earth expecting to find a primitive species still relying on manual emergency services. Instead, they'd discovered something they hadn't even known they were missing. The perfect balance between technological advancement and the irreplaceable human elements of empathy, adaptability, and controlled courage. His computer pinged with a new message. Another request for human emergency service advisors. This time from a species that literally lived in gas giants. Marcus leaned back in his chair, already thinking about how to adapt standard procedures for an environment where down was a relative concept and fire took on a whole new meaning. Well, he muttered to himself, at least it'll be interesting. From somewhere down the hall, the station alarm began to wail again. Marcus was on his feet instantly, all philosophical thoughts forgotten as training and instinct took over. Somewhere, someone needed help. Everything else was just details. As he ran toward his gear, he passed a group of alien observers who had come to study human emergency response techniques. They watched in fascination as the station erupted into controlled chaos, human firefighters moving with practiced precision toward their equipment and vehicles. I still do not fully understand, one of the observers admitted to their colleague. How can they do this day after day, knowing the risks? Marcus caught the question as he passed and couldn't resist answering, even as he pulled on his turnout gear.
That's easy,
he called back. We do it because someone has to, and because every now and then, we get to make the impossible possible. The engine's sirens began to wail as Marcus climbed aboard, and he caught one last glimpse of the alien observers. Their expressions showed a mixture of awe, respect, and lingering confusion. The same look he'd seen on Ambassador Zixtal's face all those months ago. And that, Marcus reflected as Engine 51 roared out of the station, was perhaps humanity's greatest contribution to the galactic community. Not our technology, not our scientific achievements, but our willingness to run toward danger when others ran away. Our ability to turn that seemingly irrational instinct into a systematic, trainable, repeatable process that saved lives across species barriers. The engine rounded a corner, and Marcus focused on the information coming in about their call. Somewhere ahead, someone needed help. Human or alien, the response would be the same. Assess, plan, act, adapt. It was what they trained for. It was what they did. It was, in the end, simply human. 1 year after the embassy fire, the Galactic Federation's Emergency Response Summit was in full swing on Earth. The main convention center in Geneva buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy gathered to learn from humanity's approach to crisis management. Marcus found himself standing at the podium, facing an audience that represented over 300 species. The sight would have been overwhelming if he hadn't already gotten used to working with alien first responders over the past year. The thing about emergency services, he began, isn't just about having the right equipment or following protocols. It's about understanding that every emergency is unique, and that sometimes the textbook response isn't going to cut it. A holographic being raised their light form. But how do you quantify the variables in such situations? Our simulations suggest that human emergency responses often defy optimal probability matrices. Marcus smiled, reminded of similar conversations he'd had countless times over the past year. That's because we're not trying to achieve mathematical perfection. We're trying to save lives, and sometimes that means making split-second decisions based on experience, instinct, and whatever information we have available. The discussion might have continued along these theoretical lines if not for the sudden blaring of alarms throughout the convention center. For a moment, there was confusion as various species tried to determine if this was part of the presentation. Marcus knew better. Those were evacuation alarms. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all designations," he said into the microphone, his training already kicking in. "Please proceed calmly to your designated evacuation routes. This is not a drill." The next few minutes were organized chaos as human emergency services personnel worked alongside their alien counterparts to coordinate the evacuation. The cause soon became apparent. A malfunction in one of the alien delegation's quantum transportation devices had created a cascading reality distortion in the building's lower levels. "Well," Marcus muttered as he studied the readings on his modified scanner, "this is definitely not covered in the standard operating procedures." Beside him, a Medusan emergency response trainer named Ixtal flicked their tongue nervously. "The distortion is growing exponentially. Conservative estimates give us 8 minutes before critical mass." "Then we better not be conservative," Marcus replied, already moving toward the access stairs. "Thompson, get me a line to the physics team. Rodriguez, see if you can adapt our containment foam for quantum particles. And somebody find me Ambassador Zixtal. We're going to need their expertise on crystal resonance." What followed was perhaps the most unusual emergency response operation in human history. Human firefighters worked alongside alien scientists, combining practical emergency procedures with advanced theoretical physics. Rodriguez's modified containment foam, when energized by crystalline harmonics from Zixtal's species, actually managed to slow the reality distortion's growth. "This is either brilliantly innovative or completely insane," Ambassador Zixtal observed as they coordinated the resonance frequencies. "In my experience," Marcus grunted, adjusting the foam dispersal pattern, "the best emergency responses are usually both." The operation culminated in what would later be termed the Geneva Maneuver, a precisely timed combination of human firefighting techniques, alien technology, and what Rodriguez would later describe in his report as aggressive applications of theoretical physics. The reality distortion was contained, then gradually dissipated, though not before it had turned 3 conference rooms into a Klein bottle configuration and temporarily reversed gravity in the West Wing. In the aftermath, as human and alien emergency responders worked together on cleanup and documentation, Marcus found himself in conversation with the holographic being who had asked about probability matrices. "I believe I understand now," they said, their form flickering thoughtfully. "Human emergency services are not about achieving perfect solutions. They're about achieving possible solutions," Marcus agreed, helping to secure a section of space-time that was still occasionally hiccuping. "Sometimes that means thinking outside the box, way outside the box. Like using firefighting foam to contain quantum anomalies?" "Exactly. Though I have to admit, that's a new one even for us." The incident became another chapter in the growing legend of human emergency services. The Geneva maneuver was studied and adapted across the galaxy, leading to new protocols for dealing with technological disasters. More importantly, it demonstrated how human adaptability and alien expertise could work together to handle unprecedented situations. 6 months later, the first graduating class of the International and Interspecies Emergency Response Academy celebrated their completion of training. The class included beings from 40 different species, each trained in a combination of human emergency response techniques and their own species' specialized knowledge. Marcus, now serving as one of the Academy's lead instructors, watched with pride as the graduates received their certifications. Each of them represented a bridge between human and alien approaches to emergency response, combining the best of both worlds. "You know," Ambassador Zixtal said, their crystalline form glowing with what Marcus had learned to recognize as pride. "When we first encountered humans, we thought your emergency services were primitive and reckless." "And now?" Marcus asked, though he could guess the answer. "Now we understand that they are precisely what the galaxy needed. A reminder that sometimes the most advanced solution is not about having better technology, but about having the courage to act, the wisdom to adapt, and the heart to care." Marcus watched as a group of graduates, human and alien alike, practiced with their emergency equipment, their movements showing the same controlled urgency he'd been teaching for years. "You know what the best part is?" "What's that?" "We're just getting started." 2 years after the establishment of the International and Interspecies Emergency Response Academy, humanity's influence on galactic emergency services had evolved in ways no one could have predicted. The integration of human methodologies with advanced alien technologies had given rise to what the Galactic Federation termed adaptive response protocols, though most human firefighters still called it doing what needs to be done. Marcus stood in the Academy's newest facility, a state-of-the-art training center that could simulate emergencies from across the known galaxy. The chamber's quantum engineering could recreate everything from gas giant storms to antimatter containment breaches, allowing responders to train for virtually any scenario. "Impressive, isn't it?" came a familiar crystalline voice. Ambassador Zixtal had become a regular presence at the Academy, their species' expertise in quantum harmonics proving invaluable for the more exotic training scenarios. "It's certainly something," Marcus agreed, watching as a team of trainees, 3 humans, 2 Medusans, and a gaseous collective consciousness worked to contain a simulated plasma cascade. "Though I have to admit sometimes I miss the old days of just running into burning buildings." "If I recall correctly," the ambassador's form flickered with amusement, "you still do that, rather frequently in fact." Before Marcus could respond, the Academy's alert system activated. Not the training alarm, but the real one. The holographic display showed a situation developing at the newly constructed Proxima Centauri trading hub. A critical failure in the station's artificial gravity systems had created a cascade of emergencies across multiple decks. "Well," Marcus said, already moving toward the deployment bay, "looks like class is in session." The response team assembled with practiced efficiency, a mix of human and alien emergency personnel, each bringing their own unique capabilities to the operation. The deployment pods, a marriage of human emergency vehicle design and alien FTL technology, stood ready for immediate launch. "Remember," Marcus briefed the team as they prepared for departure, "gravity failure means everything we know about fire behavior and fluid dynamics goes out the window. Rodriguez, your anti-grav experience from the Geneva incident will be crucial. Ixtel, we'll need your species' natural ability to operate in 0G. Thompson, break out the modified rescue harnesses." The journey to Proxima Centauri took minutes rather than years, thanks to the quantum tunneling technology that had been adapted specifically for emergency response. As they emerged into normal space, the trading hub's situation became immediately apparent. Sections of the massive structure were experiencing chaotic gravity fluctuations, creating zones where physics itself seemed to be having a bad day. "By the cosmic core,"
one of the newer alien responders whispered, their bioluminescent appendages pulsing with anxiety.
How do we even approach this? Marcus checked his modified scanner, a device that combined human ergonomic design with alien sensor technology. The same way we approach everything, carefully, methodically, and with a healthy respect for Murphy's Law. The operation that followed would later be described in the Academy's teaching materials as a masterclass in adaptive emergency response. The team split into specialized units, each tackling different aspects of the crisis. Human firefighters, using their experience with unpredictable fire behavior, worked to contain atmospheric breaches where gravity fluctuations had torn holes in the station's hull. Medusan responders navigated the zero-G sections with natural grace, reaching victims trapped in areas where conventional movement was impossible. Rodriguez, drawing on his experience from the Geneva incident, coordinated with the station's engineering team to stabilize the gravity generators. His innovative use of containment foam, now enhanced with quantum stabilizers, created safe corridors through the chaos, allowing for systematic evacuation of the affected areas. "You know," Thompson commented as she secured another group of rescued civilians in a gravity-stable zone. "When I first joined emergency services, I never thought I'd be using firefighting techniques to save people from quantum gravity anomalies."
To be fair," Marcus replied, helping a silicon-based being whose crystalline structure had been stressed by the gravity fluctuations. "When I started, I never thought I'd be teaching aliens how to run into burning buildings either. We adapt." The situation reached its critical point when the hub's central power core began to destabilize, threatening to create a gravitational singularity that would have torn the station apart. It was here that the true value of human-alien cooperation became evident. Marcus coordinated with Ambassador Zixtal, who had joined the operation as a technical advisor, to implement what would later be known as the Proxima Protocol, a daring combination of human crisis management techniques and alien technology. While Rodriguez and the Medusan team worked to contain the gravity fluctuations, Marcus led a team directly into the failing power core. "This is exactly the kind of situation our risk assessment protocols warn against," Zixtal communicated through the quantum comm system. "Sometimes," Marcus replied, carefully making his way through the shifting gravity fields. "The biggest risk is not taking one when lives are on the line." The solution they implemented combined traditional human firefighting principles with advanced alien physics. Using modified thermal imaging equipment to map the gravitational distortions, they treated the failing core like a structure fire, identifying the source, establishing containment, and working methodically to stabilize the situation. Hours later, as the last of the emergency was brought under control, Marcus found himself floating in what had been designated as a temporary command center, surrounded by both human and alien emergency responders. The scene would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. Beings from across the galaxy working seamlessly together, combining their unique abilities and perspectives to save lives. "You know what impresses me most about humans?" asked one of the alien trainees, their form shifting through various states of matter as they helped with the cleanup. "It's not just your willingness to run into danger. It's your ability to make that impulse systematic, teachable, and adaptable." Marcus nodded, watching as teams of human and alien responders worked together on post-incident procedures. "That's because emergency response isn't just about being brave or having advanced technology. It's about finding the best way to help people, no matter who or what they are." As they began the journey back to Earth, Marcus received a message from the Academy. 3 new species had just applied for emergency response training, inspired by the successful resolution of the Proxima incident. The message included a quote from one of the applicants. "We wish to learn the human way of controlled chaos." Marcus couldn't help but smile. The galaxy was beginning to understand what Earth's emergency responders had known all along. That sometimes the most advanced solution was simply having the heart to help, the will to act, and the wisdom to know how to do both effectively. 3 years into humanity's integration with galactic emergency services, the universe presented a challenge that would test the limits of interspecies cooperation. The incident began with a distress signal from the Omega Centauri Research Outpost, a facility dedicated to studying exotic matter physics. Marcus was reviewing training protocols with Ambassador Zixtal when the alert came through. The message was fragmented, but what they could decipher painted a grave picture. A containment failure had created what the scientists termed a cascading reality fracture. In simpler terms, the ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with concern. The fabric of space-time itself is beginning to unravel at the outpost. Marcus processed this information with the practiced calm of a veteran emergency responder,
How many personnel are stationed there? Over 800 researchers and support staff from 27 different species, Zixtal replied, including several beings composed of exotic matter who cannot be safely transported through conventional means. The Academy's response was immediate. Within minutes, a joint task force was assembled, combining the most experienced human emergency personnel with specialists from across the galaxy. The deployment pods launched in perfect formation, their quantum drives pushing the boundaries of safe acceleration. During the approach, Marcus coordinated with his team via the neural interface system that had become standard equipment for interstellar emergency operations. This situation combines elements from both the Geneva incident and the Proxima crisis, he explained. We're dealing with reality distortion like in Geneva, but on a scale closer to what we saw at Proxima. Rodriguez, your experience with quantum foam containment will be crucial. Already modifying the formula, Rodriguez replied, his holographic workspace displaying complex molecular structures. We'll need to account for the exotic matter interactions this time. The scene that greeted them at the outpost defied conventional physics. Sections of the station existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously, while others seemed to phase in and out of normal space-time. Emergency beacons pulsed with distress signals that seemed to arrive both before and after they were sent. Standard operating procedures aren't going to cut it here, Marcus observed, studying the chaotic readings on his enhanced scanner. We need to innovate. What followed was perhaps the most complex emergency operation in human history. The response team split into specialized units, each tackling different aspects of the crisis. Human firefighters, drawing on their experience with unstable structures, worked to establish safe zones in the shifting reality. Their innate ability to adapt and improvise proved invaluable in an environment where the laws of physics were more guidelines than rules. Ambassador Zixtal coordinated with a team of crystalline beings, using their natural resonance abilities to stabilize portions of the fragmenting reality. Rodriguez led a group of engineers in deploying modified containment measures, while Thompson organized the evacuation of species that could safely be moved through conventional space. The operation reached its critical point when they discovered the source of the reality fracture. A quantum computation core that had achieved an unauthorized level of complexity. The device had begun to alter the fundamental constants of the universe around it. The core needs to be contained and shut down, a senior scientist explained, their multidimensional form flickering with anxiety. But the local space-time distortion makes it impossible to approach safely. Marcus studied the situation, drawing on decades of experience with seemingly impossible rescues. Impossible just means we haven't figured out the right approach yet, he said, already formulating a plan. Ambassador, can your people establish a resonance field to temporarily stabilize the local reality? Briefly, Zixtal confirmed, but maintaining it will put enormous strain on our crystalline structures. Rodriguez, what about the quantum foam? Could we modify it to create a tunnel of stable space-time? Rodriguez ran the calculations through his augmented reality display. It's theoretically possible, but we'd need perfect timing and coordination. Then that's what we'll do, Marcus decided. Because if we don't, this reality fracture will continue to spread until it affects half the galaxy. The plan they developed combined traditional firefighting principles with advanced physics in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. They treated the reality fracture like a structure fire, establishing containment zones and working methodically inward, while accounting for the fact that inward was currently a relative concept that changed depending on one's quantum state. Human emergency responders, protected by modified turnout gear that incorporated alien technology, moved through the stabilized corridors created by the crystalline being's resonance fields. They carried specialized equipment that merged traditional firefighting tools with quantum engineering. Pressure hoses that sprayed Rodriguez's enhanced containment foam, thermal cameras modified to detect reality distortions, and cutting tools that could work in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The operation culminated in what would later be termed the Omega Protocol, a precisely coordinated series of actions that required split-second timing across multiple quantum states. As the crystalline beings maintained a bubble of stable space-time, human firefighters advanced through Rodriguez's quantum foam corridor to reach the computational core. You know, Marcus commented as he led the final approach team. When I first joined the fire service, I never thought I'd be using a modified Halligan tool to shut down a reality-warping quantum computer. And I, Ambassador Zixtal responded through the quantum comm, their voice strained from maintaining the resonance field. Never imagined I would consider such an action rational rather than suicidal. The shutdown sequence was successful, though not without cost. Several of the crystalline beings suffered structural fatigue from maintaining the resonance field, and Rodriguez's quantum foam containment system had to be completely redesigned after being exposed to exotic particle interactions. In the aftermath, as emergency teams from across the galaxy worked to stabilize the outpost and treat the affected personnel, Marcus found himself in a debriefing session with multiple potential futures demonstrates something remarkable about human emergency services. That we're crazy enough to run into reality-warping disasters? Marcus suggested. That you have found a way to make such craziness both systematic and teachable, the council member corrected. Your methods, when combined with our technology, create possibilities we never imagined. The incident led to significant advances in emergency response protocols throughout the galaxy. The Academy established new training programs specifically focused on reality-warping emergencies, while human firefighting techniques were further adapted for exotic physics situations. 4 years after Earth's emergency services began their galactic integration, the universe presented a challenge that would redefine the very concept of crisis response. The incident began in the Andromeda Milky Way Bridge project, humanity's most ambitious collaborative effort with the Galactic Federation. The bridge was designed to create a controlled wormhole between the two galaxies, reducing intergalactic travel time from millions of years to mere minutes. The project combined human determination with the most advanced alien technologies available, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. Marcus, now serving as Strategic Operations Director for the Interstellar Emergency Response Division, was conducting a routine inspection of the bridge's emergency protocols when the first anomalies appeared. Director Rivera, one of the quantum mechanics specialists, called out, their energy-based form flickering with concern. We're detecting unusual fluctuations in the bridge's containment field. Before Marcus could respond, Ambassador Zixtal's crystalline form materialized beside him, their structure vibrating with urgency. The readings match no known patterns in our database. The bridge is attempting to establish connections with multiple points across both space and time simultaneously. The situation escalated rapidly. The bridge's experimental wormhole technology had begun to create what the scientists termed temporal spatial crossroads, points where different moments in time and space intersected unpredictably. The effect was spreading, threatening not just the bridge facility but the very fabric of causality in both galaxies. Initiate emergency protocol Omega-7, Marcus commanded, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. And get me a direct link to the Academy. We're going to need every available responder with temporal crisis training. The response that followed would later be described in the Academy's archives as the moment when human emergency services transcended conventional physics. Teams of human and alien responders deployed across multiple temporal planes, using modified equipment that could maintain coherence across different time streams. Rodriguez, who had continued advancing his quantum containment technologies, led a team in developing what he called temporal firefighting, techniques for containing and redirecting temporal energy the same way traditional firefighters managed heat and smoke. The principles are the same, he explained during a briefing that technically occurred both before and after the crisis began. We're just applying them to time instead of temperature. The operation reached its critical phase when they discovered the root cause. The bridge had inadvertently tapped into what alien scientists called the temporal substrate, the underlying framework that maintained the proper flow of time itself. We need to stabilize the temporal field, Ambassador Zixtal announced, their crystalline form now incorporating elements of human emergency equipment. But doing so will require coordinated action across multiple timelines simultaneously. Marcus studied the holographic displays showing the spreading temporal distortions. Then we'll coordinate across timelines. Thompson, deploy the temporal anchor teams. Rodriguez, begin temporal foam containment procedures. Ambassador, we'll need your people's resonance abilities to maintain stability across the time stream intersections. What followed was perhaps the most complex emergency operation ever attempted by any species. Human firefighters, wearing chrono-shielded turnout gear, moved through temporal distortions with the same methodical precision they once used in burning buildings. They worked alongside crystalline beings who used their natural resonance to stabilize local time fields, while energy-based entities monitored the quantum states of reality itself. The operation culminated in what became known as the chronological convergence maneuver, a synchronized effort across multiple timelines to contain and redirect the temporal energy back into stable patterns. It required perfect coordination between teams that existed minutes, hours, and even days apart from each other in normal time. You know what's really impressive? Thompson commented during a briefing that technically occurred 3 days before she made the comment. We're basically applying standard fire control techniques to time itself. Establish a containment perimeter, control the flow, eliminate the threat. The resolution of the bridge crisis marked a turning point in galactic emergency response. Human emergency services had proven that their methodologies could be adapted to handle even the most exotic and reality-bending situations. The incident led to the establishment of the Temporal Emergency Response Division, specializing in crisis management across time itself. 6 months after the bridge incident, or possibly before, given the temporal anomalies that still occasionally manifested, Marcus found himself addressing a new class of emergency responders at the Academy. The auditorium was filled with beings from across 2 galaxies, all there to learn what humans had termed practical impossible problem solving. The key to emergency response, he told them, isn't just about having the right equipment or understanding the physics involved. It's about maintaining clear thinking and methodical action even when reality itself doesn't make sense. It's about remembering that no matter how complex the crisis, our fundamental purpose remains the same: helping those in need. Ambassador Zixtal, their form now permanently modified by their experiences in temporal firefighting, added their own perspective.